It's Parshas Savo, and it's a tough Parsha. It's a tough Parsha because we have the admonition, the harsh, the fierce, the devastating, the downright depressing litany of curses. In the event that we follow the Almighty in His Torah, we hearken to Him. We adhere to Him. We commit ourselves with full devotion to what He wants of us, what He instructs us, what He commands us, to His Torah. Then we will be the recipients of great blessing in all different ways. But in the event that we deviate, we veer off the path, we depart from God and His Torah, well, then we read what happens to us, and something very different happens to us. 98 bone-chilling curses will befall our people. If we repudiate the covenant that we forge with God, we will suffer tremendously. And as any student of Jewish history knows, these curses, they're fierce, they're intense, and they're clairvoyant. Because over the course of our long and storied and tortured and glorious history, all of these curses have come true. And we read it this week, and when they read it in shul, the Baal Koreh, the reader of the Torah, reads it very fast in a low tone. And if you're following along, trying to say the words as we're told we're supposed to, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to keep up most weeks. Certainly this week, it's a low tone and it's rapid fire. And if you think about the words and you read them, it's painful. It's difficult. It's harsh. It's bitter. It's fierce. Even just to read it. And the Talmud tells us that it's no coincidence that this is the Torah portion we read before Rosh Hashanah. You know, what we read is synchronized with the calendar. Because what we read, it's not just what we're supposed to read about the Torah. It's supposed to be relevant to us when we're reading it. And the Talmud says we read it at the end of the year, just prior to Rosh Hashanah. And that's not a coincidence. Says the Talmud, the book of Megillah, page 31b. Ezra Titken, Ezra the scribe, he enacted that we read this section, the curses of Deuteronomy of Devarim, right before Rosh Hashanah. Why? Let's end the year and all of its curses. It's been a rough year. It's been a difficult year. It's been a year where we've really, as a nation, we've witnessed a lot of curses. We've endured a lot of curses. And yes, of course, we've been blessed as well. But collectively, there's been a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And we hope that this Parsha, we're getting rid of it. Let's get rid of all those curses before the end of the year. It's almost like, people who paid their deductible. And it's December or November, all sorts of elective medical needs are addressed. Why? Because we already got all the pain. Let's get rid of it all before the end of the year. Let's exhaust all the curses at the end of the year. And when we begin the year, it should be only blessing. It's true every year, and it's especially true this year. We hope that next year brings us only blessing, only goodness for all of us. And in this Parsha podcast, I want to focus on a theme found throughout the Parsha and really throughout all of our religious Jewish life. It's a central idea. It's an idea that we mentioned a bunch of times in the past, but it comes across many times in our Parsha. It's central to the life of a believer, and it's worth revisiting. As we mentioned, the main subject of our Parsha are the blessings and the curses. And truthfully, we have the blessings and the curses in the future when the nation crosses over the Jordan. You got to go to these two mountains, Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal, and half the nation's on one mountain, half of the nation is on the other mountain, and we have blessings and curses. And then we read more broadly, our nation, we live by a code, we live by the Torah, and our treatment from God will be determined by how we observe His law, His code, His corpus. And again, it's the harshest part of the Torah. The admonition, as it's known, the tochacha, it's fierce, and we read all the awful, awful, awful things that will happen to us if we abandon God and His Torah. And of course, they read it fast, and it's hard for us to follow, but we are supposed to read it. And it's supposed to get our attention. And the question I want to pose is, what are we supposed to learn from this? How are we supposed to try to process this? What's a way of thinking about this? What's the takeaway for us? And of course, the larger takeaway is, well, do whatever you can to avoid such a fate. But how are we supposed to think about all the suffering that our nation has endured throughout our history? So I want to suggest a way of thinking about an idea. It's a bit aspirational, but it's found in so many different ways and so many different places and so many different citations in our literature. It's definitely true. And yes, it is aspirational, and that's okay, as we shall see. We're trained that when something bad happens to us, when something difficult, painful, challenging happens to us, or even when something good happens to us, but it's not fully good, it's got some negative elements to it as well. We're trained in our literature. And really, if you have a broad, expansive retrospective of history, in our history, that there's nothing that God gives us that's ultimately for our detriment. It's always, 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 always truly for our benefit, even if it seems otherwise. The classic teaching of the Talmud tells us when something good happens, you have to make a blessing to thank God. And when something bad happens to you, this is what the Talmud says, you have to bless God. Something good happens, something bad happens, it's the same. Both of them, you have to bless God. And the reason the Talmud says is because they're both good. And the good thing that happens to you, it's good. And it's obvious to you that it's good. And the bad thing that happens to you, it's good. It's just not obvious to you. But it's just as good as the good thing, and therefore you have to bless God, just as you bless God. For good things, you bless God for bad things. And Talmud illustrates this with an iconic episode of Rabbi Akiva. We've said the story before. Every Jewish child knows the story. Rabbi Akiva, he was traveling, and he was looking for a place to stay overnight, and no one wanted to give him a room, so he was forced to go with his possessions, his rooster, his donkey, his candle. He was forced to sleep at the field. But Rabbi Akiva had a motto, he had a mantra, he had an aphorism, he had an axiom. He had a favorite adage. Kol da'avid rachman l'tav avid. Everything that God does is for the best. So I'm denied lodging and I'm forced to sleep in the field. Can you imagine the great Rabbi Akiva, the greatest sage of the era? And no one offers him a place to stay, can't even sleep on the couch. He's forced to go to the field. Could you imagine what a disgrace? Rabbi Akiva says, no. This is good. I don't see how it's good, but I know it's good. And he's out in the field, and at least he has his candle, and he has his rooster, and he has his donkey. But they all go bad. The wind comes and extinguishes the candle, and a jaguar comes and eats the rooster, and then a lion comes and eats the donkey, and he's left with nothing. He's out in the field, no lodging, and his possessions have been destroyed. And every time he says, Kol de'avid rachmana l'tav avid, everything God does is for the best. And that night, a marauding band of conquistadors attacked that whole area. And everyone in the town, everyone was ravaged. And all the people who were staying in the inn that Rabbi Akiva wanted to stay in, they were all attacked. And they were rampaging through the city and through the environs, and anyone they found, they attacked. Seems like attacking Jews is not a new thing. It was done millennia ago. And Rabbi Akiva realized in the morning, well, now I see how it was a blessing. If I was given lodging, I would have suffered. If my candle wasn't destroyed, if my rooster wasn't destroyed, if my donkey wasn't destroyed, I would have suffered. So I can witness, I can visualize, I can now appreciate how all those bad things were actually good. He had a motto, and his motto was vindicated. It was justified. Now the motto is still true. It's rare for us to see as clearly as Rabbi Akiva did how it was ultimately for his benefit. But the Talmud declares, and again, this is a thing we find many places in the Talmud, everything that God does for us is for our benefit. God loves us more than a parent loves a child. There is no way that God would do something that's to our detriment. Now, sometimes we don't see it. We don't appreciate it. We have to bless it. Nonetheless, you got to bless for the bad as if it was good, because it actually is good. Rabbi Akiva, he had this motto, and he was given a little window to show, oh, you're actually right. But even when we're not shown that, it is ultimately for our benefit. The Parsha begins with the mitzvah of bikurim, the first fruit. You arrive at the land, the temple's built. You take the 7 special fruits the land is praised with: wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. And when you notice the first fruit of the crop, you wrap a special red ribbon around it, and you bring it to Jerusalem in a nice decorative basket, and you bring it to the temple, and you present it to the Kohen. It's like one of the tithes. It's like the challah, the first of the dough, and the first 10% goes to the Levite, and the 2% goes the truma to the Kohen, and so on. And the first of the animals, the first of your children, the first of everything goes to God and his emissaries. And this is the first fruit, the bikurim. You give it to the Kohen, you make a proclamation, and you detail all the goodness that God has done for you. And this is you making a declaration. God, you do good for me. And I'm not an ingrate. I'm going to appreciate all the good that you are doing for me. And there's an amazing observation that our sages tell us. If you look at the Mishnah in the book of Bikurim, so there's a book of Mishnah about this mitzvah, the mitzvah of Bikurim, of the first fruit. And it describes what you're supposed to do to fulfill this mitzvah. How do you separate, how do you designate the bikurim? A person goes and they're traveling in the field and they're waiting for the fruits to blossom, to bloom. And he sees a te'ena, a fig, a grapevine, or a pomegranate. And he sees the first buds of this year's crop, of this year's yield. Tie a ribbon around it and you declare, Hare zu bikurim, this is bikurim, this is the first fruit. And eventually, once it ripens and once you harvest it, you take those same fruits, the first ones, and you bring it to the temple, you give it to the Kohen. Now this law applies with 7 fruits. The 7 fruits, the 7 special fruits that the land of Israel is praised with. And the Mishnah gives us 3 examples. Te'ena, a fig, eshkol, a vine, rimon, a pomegranate. So first of all, it doesn't have to give 3 examples. 1 example is sufficient. And if you bring 3, bring all 7. The commentaries observe these 3 were bunched together before. In chapter 13 of the book of Numbers, Parshas Shlach, Moshe sends spies, scouts, to go inspect, reconnoiter the land. And they come back with gargantuan fruits. What do they bring? Numbers, Bamidbar, chapter 13, verse 23. They bring vines, they bring figs, they bring pomegranates. The Mishnah, when it gives the examples, the samples of the different fruits, it's those same 3. The vines, the grapes, the pomegranates, and the figs. The Arizal tells us, the Arizal, the greatest of the Kabbalists, this mitzvah of bringing bikurim, this is our rectification of the sin of the spies. The spies, they got to the land and said, no, this is terrible. God wants to make us suffer. God wants us to be killed and slaughtered. We'll never conquer it. Well, let's go back to Egypt. And here we have a mitzvah where we say, no, we're happy to be here. Thank you, Hashem, for bringing us here. And thank you for giving us so much over here. And we're appreciating what you gave us in the land. And this is how we rectify the sin of the spies. And that's why the examples that the Mishnah cites are the same exact fruits that the spies brought as samples. They brought it to besmirch the land, to slander the land, and we're doing the opposite. We're taking those same fruits and we're praising the land. But if you think about it, what's the mitzvah? It's to appreciate the goodness of Hashem. The spies, they get to the land and all they see is curses. And they thought that God was positioning the people for disaster. They saw everyone dying, do you recall? Eretz ocheles yoshveh. It's a land that consumes those who dwell upon it. Rashi says that's a blessing in disguise. God was giving them cover. Everyone's dying. No one's going to notice these 12 Israelites going inspecting the land. There was good. There was blessing. They saw curse. They saw bad. That was the fundamental mistake that they made. And Bikurim, where we recognize the goodness and we acknowledge it and we proclaim it and we're not an ingrate and we realize that everything that Hashem does is for our benefit, that's how we rectify it. The Parsha begins with this mitzvah. That's the theme I want to focus on here in this week's Parsha podcast. Everything that God sends our way. It may appear to be a curse. That's what the spies thought. But really it's a blessing that we have to thank God and bless Him for. Now, right after the mitzvah of Bikurim, we have the Vidui Meiser, which is the confession of the tithes. Every 3 years, when you finish the schedule of tithes, you go to the temple and you make another declaration. And you say, I fulfilled all my responsibilities. I've given the Levites. I've given the poor people. I've done everything that you commanded to do. I didn't violate any of the mitzvahs. I didn't forget anything. I've checked all the boxes. I'm completely in conformance with the schedule of the tithes. And I also followed the proper laws and so on. I have done everything that you've commanded me. That's the declaration. And then we asked God to respond in kind. Gaze from your heavenly abode. Min hashamayim, from heaven. Uvarech samcha es Yisrael. And bless your nation. Bless Israel. And the land that you have given to us. As you have sworn, as you have pledged to our forefathers. Eretz savas chalav udvash. A land flowing with milk and honey. You've done your job. We've done our job. We brought all the tithes, and we followed all the scheduling. And year 1, which is the first tithe, and the second tithe, and year 2 is also first tithe, second tithe. Year 3 is the first tithe and the tithe for the poor people. We've done all the tithes properly, and we're asking for you to gaze from heaven. Hashtifa mima'on kadshecha. Gaze from your heavenly, your holy abode from heaven, and bless us. And this word, hashtifa, means to gaze, to overlook. And Rashi tells us, it's a word that doesn't appear very often in the Torah, but it usually connotes misfortune. For example, in Genesis chapter 18, when the angels, they went to Abraham, he thought they were people, he fed them, and then after they finished with Abraham, they went to the city of Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy it. And the verse says, Vayashtifu, and they gazed upon the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. They set their gaze upon it. That is a different type of gaze. That was a gaze that connotes punishment. An evil gaze. A gaze of misfortune. There's only one time in all of Scripture where the word hashtifa or vayashtifu, that word, it's positive. And that's in our Parsha, chapter 26, verse 15 of the book of Devarim, Parshas Savo. Hashtifa mima'on kadshecha. Gaze from your holy abode from heaven and bless us. And here's something very interesting in a Torah lecture this week. This word, it usually connotes misfortune. Here's the only exception where this word hashtifa connotes a blessing. Why is there blessing in this word, in this verse? Do you know why? Hashtifa mima'on kachecha min hashamayim. Gaze from your heavenly abode, from heaven. Hashtifa, it connotes misfortune unless you're looking down, you're gazing down from heaven. If you were to look from here, you may see misfortune. And that's what the word hashtifa means. It's misfortune. Look what's happening. But anytime the word hashtifa means from heaven, from the heavenly above, from God's perspective, so to speak, it's positive. The word hashtifa, is it negative? Is it positive? It depends. From our vantage point, it may be interpreted as negative, as a punishment, as misfortune. But when it's min hashamayim, when it's from heaven, when it's from God's perspective, then it is a blessing. And this principle is the same idea. The spies, well, they thought there was curse, there was misfortune. But from heaven, from God's perspective, it was a blessing. From the perspective of God, it's always blessing. When we read the blessings and the curses, the Talmud tells us we have to bless God for the blessings and we have to bless Him for the curses. And again, as I warned you, I gave a disclaimer. This is a bit aspirational, but on a conceptual level, on a theoretical level, on a philosophical level, we are taught, we're trained to believe that good and bad are just two flavors of good when it comes from heaven, of course. This does not mean that other people can't do evil. When it comes from heaven, it could be a blessing, it could be a curse, but actually from the perspective of God, it's always a blessing. I want to fast forward to the end of the Parsha. Chapter 28 is the most difficult chapter in the whole Torah to read. And again, it's read fast, it's read in an undertone, and if you read it and you translate the words, it's very painful. And that's compounded if you have a sense of Jewish history. But chapter 29, it's a very interesting set of verses. Moshe calls all of Israel. And he makes a statement. Listen to the statement. Atem re'isem, you saw what God did before your very eyes in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh and to all of his servants and to his entire land. He's going back to Egypt and he says, you saw something very special. Hamasos hagdolos, the great miracles that your eyes saw, the signs and the wonders, the great wonders. Think about what it was like. It's a callback to Egypt, right? 10 plagues, miracles, splitting of the sea, death of the firstborn, manna. It's just been an incredible ride. And then Moshe, verse 3 of chapter 29, he says something fascinating. V'lo nasan Hashem lachem, and God did not give you leiv ladas, a heart to understand, einayim liros, eyes to see, ears to hear, until this very day. You witness great things. You witness incredible things that happened to Pharaoh, to Egypt, these great miracles, these wonders, and these signs. But you didn't have the heart to understand, or the eyes to see, or the ears to hear until today. You didn't get it until today. Now, this is at the end of the 40 years. So it's been 40 years since the Exodus. And Moshe actually addresses that in verses 4 and 5 and so on. It took you 40 years to get the message of those miracles. Now you understand it. Today you understand it. But yesterday and the preceding 40 years, you didn't have the heart to understand and the eyes to see and the ears to hear. You didn't get it. You read Rashi. It's just absolutely fascinating what Rashi says. Rashi says that Moshe is giving them a compliment. It's a compliment. Maybe it's a backhanded compliment. He's saying what you didn't get until now, and now you finally understand. What did you not understand? You didn't recognize the kindnesses of God, and you didn't want to cleave to him. And then Rashi explains what happened on this day. Till this day. Today everything changed, but until now you didn't understand, you didn't recognize, you didn't have the heart to understand, and the eyes to see, and the ears to hear the kindnesses of God, and you didn't want to cleave to him. Until today. What happened today? So Rashi says, first of all, Rashi says, this is what I heard. He's saying, this is the interpretation that I heard. On that day, the day that Moshe is speaking, the day where they had this transformation, when they finally got it. On that day, Moshe delivered a Torah scroll to the Levites. Rashi says this is actually told later on in the Torah. In chapter 31, Moshe gave the Torah scroll to the Levites. Moshe's been teaching Torah for 40 years, but he's been teaching the oral Torah. The written Torah is only delivered at the end of the 40 years. And on this day, the day that Moshe is referencing in our verse, chapter 29, verse 3, that was the day that Moshe gave the written Torah, the Torah scroll, to his fellow Levites. And the Israelites, they came to Moshe. And they said to Moshe, Rabbeinu, Moshe, our teacher, why are you giving the Torah scroll to the Levites and not to us? We also stood at Sinai. We also accepted the Torah. We also had the Torah given to us. Why are you making your fellow Levites supreme over us? And maybe tomorrow, sometime in the future, maybe they'll say, we have the Torah and not you. The Levites may say, well, Moshe gave us the written Torah, the Torah scroll, and he didn't give it to you, so obviously the Torah is ours and it's not yours. We are demanding, say the Israelites, we're demanding the Torah. That's what happened on this day, the day of the transformation. V'samach Moshe al hadavar. And Moshe was happy on this matter. I was thinking today, I don't remember any other time that Moshe was happy in the Torah. It's a good trivia question. Where in the Torah was Moshe happy? Rashi tells us, chapter 29, verse 3 of our Parsha Savo, of the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. Rashi says, V'samach Moshe al hadavar. Moshe was happy. And regarding this, the same day, where the people are demanding the Torah, he says, he had said to them, meaning a few chapters earlier, he said, Hayom hazeh nihiyeh sala'am. On this day, you became a nation. Chapter 27, earlier in our Parsha, Moshe tells the nation, on this day, Hayom hazeh, today, the same day that Moshe delivered the Torah scroll to the Levites, and the nation demands it. This is the day where they finally have the heart to understand and the eyes to see and the ears to hear. This is the day that they became a nation. Hayom hazeh hivanti. Today I understood that you want to cleave to God. You're desirous of God. An amazing comment here in Rashi. Something clicked for the nation on this day that they didn't get for 40 years. Something very important. Something that Moshe is saying, you didn't have the heart to understand. You didn't have the eyes to see. You didn't have the ears to hear. You didn't process all those incredible miracles and wonders and signs. And today, you got it. And therefore today is really when you started as a nation. Hayom hazeh nihiyeh sala'am. Today you became a nation. Notwithstanding all that the nation witnessed for 40 years, on some level, Moshe is telling them that you weren't a nation. And what did you not recognize? You didn't recognize the kindnesses of God. And you did not seek to cleave to him. For 40 years, the nation was still resistant to God. For 40 years, the nation did not recognize the goodnesses of God. And yes, they had the Torah, and yes, they had the mitzvos, and yes, they were officially, nominally a religion of God. But they may have thought the Torah was a bit of a burden. It's a bit of a nuisance. It's a hassle. I'll do it because it's true, because otherwise I'll get punished, because otherwise I'll be an outcast. Because this is what we do. But they didn't recognize that this was all a gift from God. All kindness from God. And something very dramatic happened on this day. Something that made Moshe glad. He was happy. The nation comes in and says, we demand the Torah. They came begging for Torah scrolls. And Moshe is delighted. And up to this point, he tells them, you didn't have the heart to understand. You didn't have the eyes to see. You didn't have the ears to hear. You failed to see the kindnesses of God. You didn't realize that everything Hashem did for you was all because he loves you and wants to give you goodness and kindness and benevolence. For 40 years, he was still a little bit resisting. You weren't fully open to it. You didn't quite realize that it's all for your benefit. Until today, on this day, on that day, they became a nation. They realized, they got it. They've been seeing the miracles nonstop, and they finally got it. They finally became a nation. They finally realized what it's all about. The Almighty loves them and just wants to do goodness and kindness for them. And it's all for our benefit. After 40 years, it finally sunk in. They finally got it. Everything is for the benefit. Everything's for our benefit. All that we get from the Almighty. It's all good. You think about what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach Torah. We're not crusaders trying to spread Torah. We have to realize that the Almighty has given us bread and air and oxygen and life and gold and pearls and water. Those are all things, by the way, that the Torah is compared to. It's the greatest gift ever given to mankind. It's only good, no bad. And the nation, notwithstanding the miracles and the sign of revelation, the Exodus and the manna, it took them 40 years to get it. Up to that point, they didn't have the heart, didn't have the eyes, didn't have the ears. They were still a bit stiff-necked. Now, I find this fascinating for all sorts of reasons. Obviously, question number one is, what took them so long? Why didn't they get it for 40 years? Question two is, well, what actually happened on this day that made them realize, that made them open their eyes to understand that it was all for their benefit? Now, Rashi says that when Moshe gave the Torah to the Levites, and maybe I was thinking, this is just a side point, maybe the fact that it's often true that when someone loses something, they finally appreciate it. Maybe when they imagined themselves losing the Torah and the Levites having it and them not having it, maybe then it clicked for them. I also find it interesting that Rashi says that on this day they became a nation, meaning the definition of our nation is to recognize that everything that God does is for our benefit. But on the actual revelation, this is what we're seeing throughout the whole Parsha. On this day, today you became a nation. Today you came begging for Torah. Today something clicked. Today you realize that the Torah is God's kindness. It's a gift. And you came and you demanded it. And you wanted to cleave to him. And again, for 40 years they observed the Torah. They kept it. They didn't repudiate it. But only now did they realize that it's completely for their benefit. It's completely good. It's completely kindness. The nation realized something very important. And Moshe tells them, Hayom Azeni Yisrael, today you became a nation. Today you demanded the Torah. Today you realize it's all a gift. It's all kindness from heaven. Today you realized that everything that comes our way from heaven, the blessings and the curses, it's all a blessing. It took the nation 40 years to recognize this. There was still a consideration. For 40 years, that maybe the Torah is for our detriment. It took him 40 years to come around. I said this is an aspirational insight. We believe, we know, we're trained to recognize that everything that comes from heaven is good. And certainly when viewed from heaven is good. And all the suffering that people have endured, all the curses that we've experienced throughout our history, ultimately is for our benefit. But it's still hard for us to come to terms with it. We should know we're in very good company. For 40 years, the nation, the people that witnessed all these miracles and all these signs and all these wonders, they were still not convinced that the Torah was for their benefit. And the truth is, we only want blessings, and we want blessings that are undeniable blessings, unambiguous blessings. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have Rosh Hashanah. And we're going to wish each other a Shana Tova Umituka. A good year, Shana Tova, a good year. Umituka, and a sweet one. If it's a good year, why does it need to be sweet? Commentaries tell us it's always going to be a good year. But sometimes it's going to be bitter like hell. And it's good. And if we could have the viewpoint from heaven, if we could look down from heaven, if we could be hashtifa min hashamayim, we'll know it's good. But only when Messiah comes will we recognize it. And we don't want that. We want perceptible goodness. We want sweet goodness. Everything is good, but there's two flavors. There's good and sweet, and there's good and awful and bitter. We want Shana Tova Umetuka. In our Amidah prayers, the very first prayer, Gomel Chasadim Tovim. God does benevolent acts of kindness, good acts of kindness. Well, if it's kindness, it's good. To say good kindnesses, that's redundant. And again, the Hasidic masters tell us everything is kindness. Everything is good. But sometimes it stings. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's painful. We want good kindnesses. We want a sweet new year. We want it to be also perceptibly good. We have a very, very hard time finding the good in tragedy. And yes, we could be taught and we could be trained to know that it's ultimately for our benefit. And yes, if we could gaze down from heaven and we could see the world from the perspective of heaven, we would know it. And even when there's no apparent silver lining, we believe and we trust that it's only for our good. But nevertheless, it's very hard for us to see it now. And the verse tells us in the future, when God restores Zion, we'll be like dreamers. Az yimale schok pinu, and then our mouths will be full of laughter. Then there will be a time where we're going to be brought up to heaven, so to speak, and we'll be privy to that viewpoint. And then our mouths will be full of laughter. Now, it's impossible for us to perceive that fully. Rabbi Akiva was given a little window. That was his mantra. That was his adage that he lived by. That was an aphorism that he constantly told the students. He's Rabbi Akiva. We don't always have the benefit of being shown what's actually happening behind the scenes, behind the curtain. We don't get the hashtifa, the gaze from heaven. In the future, our mouths will be full of laughter because in the future, we'll be able to perceive it fully. And now I said it's aspirational. We don't get to experience this. That said, I want to kind of add some more little points of this idea. First of all, Rabbi Akiva, he had his adage that he would say, his aphorism, Kol de Avid Rachmana letav Avid. Everything that God does is for our good, our benefit. There was another sage from the Mishnaic era. In fact, the teacher of Rabbi Akiva, his name was Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum, the man of Gamzu. And why was he known as Gamzu? Because he had a different adage. His adage was Gamzu Latova. This is also Latova, for good. And the Hasidic masters tell us that there are different gradations of recognition of this idea. Rabbi Akiva would say, well, all that God does is for the best. And yes, my candle went out and my rooster is dead and my donkey was eaten. And that's not ideal, but you know what? It's better than the alternative. And therefore the silver lining actually justifies and overrides the suffering and the misery. Nachum Ish Gamzu, he had a different aphorism. Gamzu Latova. Even this is for good. Rabbi Akiva, his perspective, you could say, well, it's bad, but it's it's better because look at all the other good things that outweigh the bad. His teacher had a different perspective. He said, Gam Zulatov, also this thing. It's not just that the net result of everything is good, and therefore we'll tolerate the bad because ultimately we prefer the good that comes with the bad over the bad. He says, no. Gam Zulatov, even the bad. If you have the gaze from heaven, if you have the hashtifa, the gaze from shamayim, from heaven, even the suffering is good. And to wrap up, I want to share with you an idea that I proposed in the past, but it relates to what we spoke about last week in the Parsha podcast. And when I looked over my notes and I saw this, I said, oh, this is something I mentioned, three or so years ago. Most of y'all probably forgot it. Okay, let's be honest, okay? Do you remember what I said 3 weeks ago? I don't even remember what I said 3 weeks ago. So I don't begrudge anyone that forgets what I said 3 weeks ago. Certainly not 3 years ago. But if you've heard it, it's okay. It's been 3 years. It's past due for us to revisit it. And it relates to what we said last week. So I figure it's worthy of mentioning it because it also relates to our subject, this very important subject. Everything that God does is for our benefit. Last week we spoke about the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and rebellious son. And the Talmud tells us, Lo haya, never happened, velo asid lihios, and it never will happen. So why is it written, Drosh v'kabel schar, study it and gain reward? There's the mitzvah, you gotta execute the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and rebellious son, but it never happened. It never happened, never will happen. So why is it taught in the Torah? Study it and gain reward. And we speculated last week a reason why it's so rewarding. You know why? Because this kid's unsalvageable. This kid's destined to become a criminal. He's going to be executed in a Jewish court of law. Kill him when he's innocent. He's unsalvageable. But it never happened and never will happen. And that's the reward. That's the lesson. No kid is unsalvageable. This was said last week. I want to suggest a different idea. A different idea why the Ben Sorer Umoreh is rewarding. You see, when the Talmud tells us that there's a mitzvah, Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and rebellious son, that never happened and never will happen. So why is it written? Drosh v'kabel schar, study and gain reward. It lists 2 other mitzvos. There's 2 other mitzvahs that never happened, never will happen. So why are they written? Drosh v'kabel schar, study and gain reward. The Ir Hanidachas, the city that the entire city does idolatry. You have to destroy the whole city. Never happened, never will happen. Why is it written? Study it and gain reward. Beis Hamenuga, a house that has tsaras, never happened, never will happen. So why is it written? Study and gain reward. There's something rewarding. I want to suggest, in all of these 3 mitzvos, we learn different perspectives of our grand idea, the gaze from heaven. The perspective that from heaven it's all good. In all these 3 instances, there are things that appear to be curses, that we perceive to be terrible things, but when we drill down, we could get a little pitch from the other side, and we see how it's actually for our benefit. We spoke about the Ben Sorer Umoreh last week, the wayward and rebellious son. Why is he executed? So the Talmud tells us, because he is on a path that will guaranteed. There's no way that anything else will happen to this boy. He's going to eventually deplete his father's money. He'll go to the crossroads. He'll harass and become a bandit, and he'll be executed as a murderer. Yamus zakai va'al yamus chayv. If you think about it, this is a teenager. He's 13 years old. He's a kid. And you're going to execute him? He's a problem child. He's mischievous. He's recalcitrant. He's disobedient. And yes, he's a bit gluttonous. He likes to drink. He likes to eat meat. Are we going to execute him over this? Talmud tells us the Torah can predict his future. He will become a murderer, and he's going to be executed anyhow. Kill him when he's innocent. It's better. Let him die innocent, free of sin, unblemished. And after all, that's the whole goal of life, to return our soul to God in its total purity. is the death of the Ben Somer a good thing or a bad thing? On a surface level, it's a terrible thing. But study it deeply, and you'll gain reward. You'll be able to see the perspective from heaven. You get a little gaze, a little peephole from heaven. And when you examine it, you see it's really good. Yes, he's going to forfeit some years. But in the grand scheme of things, in the perspective of eternity, it's a marvelous exchange. A few years, 50 years in this world. Would you exchange that for 100 billion years in the eternity? To be able to return the soul unsullied and untainted to God and to bask in the eternal delight of the afterlife. It's a worthwhile exchange. Now again, it never happened, never will happen, but there's a lesson. Sometimes when bad things happen, it's actually good. Like the Ben Somer. What about the idolatrous city? The verse tells us, when it talks about the idolatrous city, in Parshas Shoftim, we must destroy the city completely. It can never be rebuilt. And we cannot take any of the plunder, any of the booty, so that God's wrath may subside. So long as there's idolatry in the world, the wrath of God is in the world. A city is destroyed. It's a disaster. And it can never be rebuilt. And all its property gets destroyed. It must be obliterated. And that sounds like a terrible thing. It sounds like a curse. But Rashi tells us, the verse tells us, that this will quell God's wrath. When there is idolatry, God has anger not just on that city, but on the whole world. That city is like a cancerous tumor, spreading death and divine anger to the whole world. If someone, God forbid, has a cancerous tumor that's metastasizing, and you have to lop off part of their body, it's a terrible thing. But it's the best thing in the world. Yes, you're destroying the city. And yes, you're obliterating its memory. But that's excising the malignant cancer from the body. It appears to be a curse. It's actually a great blessing. Now again, never happened, never will happen. But that's a perspective that's very rewarding. And there's a third example, that's haras on the house. You remove the stones, you dismantle the house. Think about it. You move to Israel, you get the new house. This is your ancestral homeland. This is where you live, your grandparents lived, and your great-grandparents and your great-grandchildren live. This is part of the land promised to you by God. And you gotta move out, and you're ashamed, and you're shunned, and everyone sees you gotta take all your furniture out of your house, and they have to bulldoze the house. And where are you gonna live? Where are you going to go? And you can't even build on that land. You can't just buy a new one because this is the ancestral homeland. And the verse tells us, chapter 14 of Leviticus, when you come to the land, I will place a negat haras on your house. And Rashi cites the Midrash. This is good news. Do you know why? Because the previous inhabitants of the land, they had gold and they had silver and they had precious gems and jewelry and diamonds. And they hid it behind the stones. And you move in and you have no idea that there's treasure lying a few feet away from you. So God is going to place a splotch, a discoloration. Is it saras? I don't know. You got to call the Kohen. And the Kohen comes and he's like, we have to dismantle this. And it's terrible. What's going to be? Where are you going to live? And you remove some of the stones. And what do you discover? In an instant, that disaster is a great blessing. And again, never happened, never will happen. But there's something rewarding. Bad things are happening all the time. There's curses everywhere. When we look at it, when we observe it, when we assess it. But here's some reward. Whatever God does is for the best. And again, there's different flavors of that. When examined from the heaven, it's only blessing. There's no misfortune. Rabbi Akiva says, everything that God does is ultimately for the best. Nachum Gamzu, even the bad is really good if you could understand it from God's perspective. It's bad from our perspective. If we unpack it, if we dismantle those walls, we can maybe discover that there's a blessing here in disguise. And these three mitzvos, There are 3 different examples of how terrible things, awful things, curses can actually be very good. Sometimes it's like tsaras on the house. You're ripping apart a package, but inside there's a treasure. It's like wrapping paper. The bad, it's just a mask. It's just something you have to pull away. To tear off, you're not forfeiting anything. And sometimes the flavor of good actually being obscured by bad, it's exchanging something very minor relatively for something major. The Ben Sa'omara, the verse, the Talmud tells us, Yamos Zakar, he'll die righteous. That is the yearning of every soul to die righteous. You could die, you could return your soul to the Almighty, unsullied, untainted by any sin. There's no greater blessing in the world than that. All the sages, all the pious men, all the righteous men, all the tzaddikim of all history, all they wanted was to die righteous. It seems like a curse. But actually, the Talmud says, no. If this person stayed alive, it would have been a disaster. Die righteous. You're doing a very good trade-off. It's hard for us to process it. Again, it's aspirational, but on a conceptual level, we recognize that this is a trade-off that we'd all gladly make. And sometimes, when we eliminate a whole city, it's actually net positive, because that would have condemned all of us and everything else to be destroyed. There are 3 mitzvahs, Talmud tells us. Never happened, never will happen. And these are 3 different perspectives for how when disaster strikes, when misfortune hits, when devastation presents itself, it's painful. It's something which hurts a lot. It stings. It's a menacing cloud, but there's a silver lining. And again, the Talmud's trying to condition us, to train us, to acclimate our mind to this. And it says something very bold. Kishem shemavarchim ala tov. Just as you bless God for good, you must bless God for bad. Because it's really the same thing. There is no bad that comes down from heaven. That's a theme in our Parsha. And again, if you don't recognize this, if I don't recognize this, we're in good company. It took our antecedents 40 years of witnessing nonstop miracles to really get it. To really say, I want to cleave to God. It's all kindness from Him. Just this morning, I'll just end off with this. Of course, it's the month of Elul. We're blowing the shofar every day. I didn't bring my phone today to Shach. I didn't record today's shofar. Forgive me. But I noticed something interesting. In the Amidah prayer, we mentioned the shofar. In the blessing about the ingathering of the exiles, Tikah b'shofar gadol lecherusenu, blow a great shofar for our liberation. And I was thinking, this is the time we're trying to improve. We're trying to think about how we can grow and how we can maximize our abilities and how we could really achieve and unlock our destiny and our greatness. And I was thinking about some of the difficulties that I have personally in trying to advance, trying to move forward. And I'm thinking, maybe I'll give up this and I'll forfeit this, but ultimately it's good. When I read these words, I noticed that for the first time, we're blowing the shofar. We're heralding the arrival of Elul. We're heralding the arrival of these important days. But it's all lecherus, it's all for our liberation. When we give up something for God, we're not forfeiting for God. It's all kindness. It's just goodness. And yes, it's hard for us to appreciate that, just as it was for our antecedents. But when we're blowing the shofar, it's to liberate us. It's to unshackle us from burdens. And again, it's hard for us to perceive this. And when this curses, it's very hard for us to bless God. But this is a theme we see over and over in our Parsha. And again, we all go through difficult times. Some have painful times, some have tragedy, some have severe suffering. And our hearts are with them all. But everyone suffers on some level. That's the fate of all mankind. And again, I'm acknowledging for the 8th time, this is an aspirational idea. And our Parsha is the greatest proof of that, because again, it took the nation 40 years to come around. But it's important for us to remember, We believe. It's hard for us to really connect with, but we believe, at least on a conceptual level, everything that comes from God is ultimately for our benefit. And you know what? If we could have just a little tiny view from heaven, we'll see it. We don't have that. In the future, we will have it, and we will be laughing. Our mouths will be full of laughter because we'll finally sense it. Until then, we have to wrestle with it. And that's okay. But this perspective is important for us to retain nonetheless, and maybe, just maybe, amidst the year of very difficult challenges and apparent curses, maybe this can provide some modicum of suffering to recognize, to understand that if Rabbi Akiva was around, he would comfort us and say, this is for good. Maybe he probably wouldn't preach it to us, because if we're resistant to it, it doesn't sound good when someone is suffering, say, oh, it's for good. But he said that about himself. If he was suffering, he would say that about himself. And that maybe could help some of us when we're going through our challenges. Maybe it could be of some comfort, and we hope and we pray that the curses will be all ended. End the year and end its curses, and the upcoming year should be a good year and a sweet year. And may we only witness good things and blessings, and may we come to the day to recognize that the Almighty really, really, really loves us and only wants to give us goodness and kindness. And then we're going to run to the Torah and say, we demand it, we want it. And then Moshe will be happy. I appreciate you listening to this edition of the Parsha Podcast, this aspirational edition of the Parsha Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Nay, 10% of how much I enjoyed it. Take care. Have a wonderful day, a splendid, splendid, splendid rest of your week. And please God, a peaceful and productive and uplifting and meaningful and powerful and delightful Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll talk again, good health and in good spirits next week.